The night my wife became Dr. Vanessa Lang, she handed me the divorce papers before she even took off her graduation cap. I should have seen it coming, but I was too busy being proud of her to notice the knife she'd been sharpening behind my back for months. "Sign here, David," she said, her voice as cold as the hospital corridors she'd soon be walking. The irony wasn't lost on me. A woman who'd just sworn to heal people was about to perform surgery on our 15-year marriage without anesthesia. I looked at the papers, then at her. Vanessa stood there in her graduation gown, diploma in one hand, my death sentence in the other. Behind her, our 17-year-old daughter Olivia smirked while recording everything on her phone, probably for TikTok. These days, everything was content for her. "Just like that?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Just like that," she confirmed. "I've outgrown this life, David. I've outgrown you." The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. I'd spent years working double shifts at my construction business to pay for her medical school, living on ramen noodles and discount coffee while she attended lectures and studied for boards. I'd been her cheerleader, her financial backer, her emotional support system, and now, at her moment of triumph, I was being discarded like yesterday's newspaper. "Dad, just sign it," Olivia said, not looking up from her phone. "Everyone knows this was coming. You're basically invisible anyway." That stung. My own daughter, the kid I'd taught to ride a bike and helped with homework for years, was treating me like a stranger. But then again, that's what happens when you become the family ghost, present, but not really seen. I signed the papers without a fight. What was the point? Vanessa had already moved on emotionally, and fighting would only give them more ammunition for their social media campaigns. I set the pen down and looked at my wife, ex-wife, one last time. "Congratulations, doctor," I said. I hope it was worth it. She didn't even respond. She was already texting someone, probably her new boyfriend, Dr. Harris Gold, the cardiac surgeon she'd been studying with for the past 6 months. I knew about him, of course. I wasn't as invisible as they thought. That night, I packed a single duffel bag and left the house I'd been paying the mortgage on for 12 years. As I walked to my truck, I heard laughter coming from the kitchen window. Vanessa was on the phone with someone, probably Miranda, her best friend who worked in hospital administration. "He actually signed without a fight," she was saying, her voice filled with amusement. God, I can't believe I wasted 15 years on that overweight nobody. Harris is picking me up in an hour. We're going to celebrate properly. Overweight nobody. The words echoed in my head as I drove away from the life I'd built. She wasn't wrong about the weight. I'd put on 40 pounds over the years, stress eating while working 70-hour weeks to support her dreams. But nobody? That was about to change. I drove through the decaying streets of our Rust Belt city, past the abandoned factories and boarded-up shops that told the story of a place time had forgotten. The streetlights cast long shadows between the crumbling brownstones, and graffiti covered most of the walls like urban hieroglyphics. This was my world. Gritty, real, honest. Vanessa's new world was all sterile hospital corridors and upscale medical conferences. We'd grown apart in more ways than geography. I ended up at Murphy's, a dive bar on the east side where the beer was cheap and nobody asked questions. The bartender, a weathered woman named Rita, poured me a whiskey without being asked. "Rough night?" she said. "Rough life," I replied, downing the drink in one gulp. That's when I met Jorge Martinez, a former boxer who owned a gym 3 blocks away. He was sitting at the end of the bar, nursing a beer and watching the late-night boxing matches on the TV above the bottles. "You look like a man who needs to hit something," he said, not taking his eyes off the screen. "More than you know," I admitted. "My gym's open 24 hours. First week's free if you're serious about changing your life." I studied his face in the dim bar light. Jorge was maybe 50, with scars around his eyes that told stories of a life lived in the ring. His hands were thick and calloused, and when he finally looked at me, His eyes held the kind of wisdom that only comes from getting knocked down and getting back up. "What makes you think I want to change my life?" I asked. "Because you're here talking to me instead of home feeling sorry for yourself," he said. "That tells me you're not the type to stay down." He was right. Sitting in that dive bar, surrounded by the honest decay of a forgotten city, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: possibility. Vanessa thought she'd discarded a nobody. She had no idea what she'd actually unleashed. "You know what?" I said, finishing my second whiskey. "I think I'll take you up on that offer." Jorge smiled and raised his beer. "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," I agreed, though I was already thinking about endings, specifically how I was going to end the comfortable new life my ex-wife thought she'd built on my broken back. 3 months later, I was a different man. Jorge's gym became my second home, and the heavy bag became my therapist. Every morning at 5 a.m., I was there throwing punches and running laps around the warehouse district. The 40 pounds melted away, replaced by muscle and a hardness I'd never possessed before. The gym was located in an old automotive repair shop, complete with exposed brick walls and industrial lighting that cast dramatic shadows across the boxing rings. The air always smelled like sweat, leather, and determination. It was populated by men and women who understood that life hits hard, and sometimes you have to hit back harder. Jorge became more than a trainer. He became the brother I'd never had. He'd fought professionally for 8 years before a detached retina ended his career, but he'd never lost his fighter's instinct. More importantly, he understood what it meant to be written off by people who should have believed in you. "Your ex-wife made one critical mistake," he told me one evening as I worked the speed bag. "She thought destroying you would be easy. She thought you'd just disappear and make her transition convenient." "Wasn't she right?" I asked, sweat dripping onto the concrete floor. "I did disappear." "No, you retreated." "There's a difference. Retreating is tactical. Disappearing is surrender." He handed me a towel. "You've been gathering strength while she's been getting comfortable. That's an advantage she doesn't know you have." He was right. While I'd been transforming myself physically and mentally, Vanessa had been living her best life as the newly single Dr. Lang. According to the social media posts Olivia couldn't resist sharing, my ex-wife was attending medical conferences in exotic locations, always with Dr. Harris Gold by her side. They looked perfect together, 2 successful doctors living the life she'd always wanted. But perfection, I was learning, was often just a carefully constructed illusion. My first real intelligence about their world came from an unexpected source: Mrs. Pruitt, the 70-year-old busybody who lived next door to my old house. She'd always liked me, mainly because I'd fixed her fence and shoveled her driveway for years without being asked. When she saw me at the grocery store, she pulled me aside with the enthusiasm of a spy passing state secrets. "David, honey, I have to tell you what I heard," she whispered, glancing around dramatically. "My niece Carla works as a nurse at the hospital, and the gossip about your ex-wife is just terrible." I tried to look disinterested, but Mrs. Pruitt was already in full storytelling mode. "Apparently, Dr. Lang has been making some serious mistakes in the emergency room. Nothing that killed anybody, mind you, but enough that the other doctors are starting to talk. Carla says she's been distracted, probably because she's too busy playing house with that cardiac surgeon." This was interesting. Vanessa had always prided herself on being perfect, meticulous to a fault. If she was making professional mistakes, it meant the stress of her new life wasn't as manageable as she pretended. "And that's not even the worst part," Mrs. Pruitt continued, clearly enjoying herself. "Carla heard Dr. Lang and that Miranda woman talking in the break room about how they're planning to take you for everything in the divorce settlement. They were laughing about how you signed so quickly, saying it proved you were too weak to fight for anything." The anger that surged through me was white-hot and immediate. It took every ounce of the discipline Jorge had taught me to keep my expression neutral. "Is that so?" I said calmly. "Oh yes, and your daughter has been just awful about the whole thing. Carla's daughter goes to the same high school. And apparently Olivia has been telling everyone that her father was a deadbeat who abandoned the family. She's got some social media thing going where she makes fun of, well, of you. That night, I went home to my studio apartment above a Chinese restaurant and did something I'd avoided for months. I looked at Olivia's TikTok account. What I found there made my blood run cold. She'd created an entire series called Deadbeat Dad Chronicles, featuring videos of her dramatically reading fake text messages, supposedly from me, begging to come home. She'd amassed over 50,000 followers, all laughing at the pathetic father who couldn't handle his wife's success. The comments were brutal, calling me everything from a loser to a parasite. But the video that really got to me was titled, "Why My Mom Finally Dumped My Dad." In it, Olivia sat in her bedroom, the bedroom I'd painted pink when she was 7, and explained to her audience how I'd been holding back her mother's career, how I was too insecure to handle being married to a doctor, and how everyone was so much happier without me around. My dad was basically invisible anyway, she said to the camera, echoing the words she'd spoken the night I signed the divorce papers. Like, he never contributed anything meaningful to our family. He was just there, taking up space and eating all the food. The video had over 200,000 views and thousands of comments praising Olivia for her honesty and courage. My own daughter had turned me into a viral joke, and I was probably the last person in the city to know about it. I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of my small apartment, listening to the sounds of the city through my thin walls. Somewhere out there, Vanessa and Harris were probably having dinner at some upscale restaurant, toasting their sophisticated new life. Olivia was probably making another video about what a failure I was. Miranda was probably feeding them both ideas for how to humiliate me further. They thought they'd buried me. They thought I was too weak, too broken, too invisible to fight back. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The plan came to me during a particularly brutal training session with Jorge. I was working on combinations, throwing punches with a precision and power that surprised even my trainer when he stopped me mid-sequence. "You're not just hitting the bag anymore," he observed. "You're fighting something specific. What's going on in your head?" I told him about the TikTok videos, about the hospital gossip, about the way they were all celebrating my supposed defeat. Jorge listened without interrupting, his scarred face growing more serious with each detail. "So they want to make you the villain," he said finally. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to give them what they want," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "They want a villain? They're going to get one." The first strike needed to be surgical, visible enough to send a message, but subtle enough to avoid legal consequences. I spent a week planning, watching, learning their routines. Vanessa drove a white BMW that she parked in the hospital's physician lot. Harris drove a red Porsche that he treated like a precious child. Both cars were symbols of the success they'd built while walking over me. On a Thursday night, I waited in the hospital parking garage until their shift ended. I watched them walk to their cars together, Harris's hand on the small of Vanessa's back in a gesture that should have been mine. They were laughing about something, probably another joke at my expense. After they drove away, I got to work. I didn't slash tires or break windows. That would have been too obvious, too crude. Instead, I used skills I'd learned from 20 years in construction. I loosened the lug nuts on Harris's Porsche just enough that they'd work themselves free after a few miles of driving. Not enough to cause a serious accident, but enough to leave him stranded on the side of the road with a very expensive problem. For Vanessa's BMW, I used an old trick Jorge had taught me from his less legal younger days. A small amount of sugar in the gas tank wouldn't destroy the engine immediately, but it would cause enough problems to require a tow and several days in the shop. But the real message was in the notes I left on their windshields. For Harris: "Enjoy your time, Doc. Your turn in the chair is coming." For Vanessa: "You wanted a divorce from a nobody. Congratulations, you're about to meet somebody." I was back in my apartment by midnight, feeling more alive than I had in months. The next morning, I went about my normal routine. Coffee at the diner, workout at Jorge's gym, then a shift doing freelance construction work. I was installing kitchen cabinets in a downtown office building when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "David, this is Vanessa. We need to talk, now." I smiled and put the phone away without responding. Let her wait. Let her wonder. Let her start to understand what it felt like to be ignored. The second text came an hour later. "I know it was you. The police are involved now." The third text, sent from what I assumed was Harris's phone, was less diplomatic. "You pathetic piece of garbage. Stay away from us, or you'll regret it." I finished the cabinet installation and drove to Murphy's bar, where Rita poured me a celebratory whiskey without being asked. Jorge met me there an hour later, grinning like a proud father. "I heard through the grapevine that a couple of doctors had some car trouble last night," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Terrible shame," I replied. "You'd think people with that much education would know how to maintain their vehicles properly." "You'd think so. Word is, they're pretty upset about it. Security cameras caught someone in the parking garage, but the footage was too dark to make a positive identification." This was true. I'd worn dark clothes and a baseball cap, and I'd been careful to stay in the shadows between the security lights. Even if they suspected me, suspicion wasn't proof. "Here's the thing about bullies," Jorge continued, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. "They're used to picking on people who won't fight back. When someone finally throws a punch, they don't know how to handle it. They get scared, and scared people make mistakes." He was right. Over the next few days, I watched from a distance as Vanessa and Harris's perfect world started to show cracks. Harris was paranoid about his car, having it inspected twice and installing a security system that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. Vanessa started parking in different spots each day, looking over her shoulder like she expected me to jump out from behind every pillar, but the best part was watching them turn on each other. According to Mrs. Pruitt's niece Carla, Harris had suggested that maybe they should lay low for a while, which Vanessa interpreted as him wanting to distance himself from her problems. They'd had a screaming match in the hospital break room that half the staff overheard. Dr. Lang called him a coward, Carla reported to her aunt, who immediately called me with the update. She said if he couldn't handle a little drama from her ex-husband, maybe he wasn't man enough for her anyway. He stormed out and didn't speak to her for the rest of the shift. The foundation of their relationship was already showing stress fractures, and I'd barely gotten started. But the real validation came from an unexpected source. Olivia called me for the first time in 4 months, her voice shaky and uncertain. "Dad? It's me. I think someone's been messing with Mom's car and stuff. She's really freaked out and she thinks it might be you." "What do you think?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. There was a long pause. "I don't know. The dad I knew wouldn't do stuff like this. But maybe I didn't know you as well as I thought." "Maybe you didn't," I agreed. "Maybe nobody did." After I hung up, I realized that for the first time in months, my daughter had called me Dad instead of David. It was a small thing, but it meant she was starting to see me as something other than the invisible man she'd been mocking online. They wanted a villain. They were getting one. But they were also discovering that the man they'd dismissed as weak and irrelevant was capable of things they'd never imagined, and this was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, the opportunity I'd been waiting for presented itself in the form of an engraved invitation that arrived at my old address. Mrs. Pruitt brought it to me at the gym, her eyes twinkling with mischief. "This came for you, dear. Looks fancy." It was an invitation to the annual Mercy General Hospital fundraising gala, a black-tie affair where the city's medical elite gathered to pat themselves on the back and raise money for new equipment. The invitation was addressed to Mr. and Mrs. David Chen, a remnant from when Vanessa and I were still married, and she was still using my name socially. They forgot to update their mailing list, I told Jorge, who was wrapping my hands for an evening training session. Or maybe the universe is giving you an opportunity, he replied. The question is, are you going to take it? I studied the invitation. The gala was being held at the Grand Ballroom downtown, the same place where Vanessa and I had attended hospital Christmas parties for years. I'd always felt out of place there, surrounded by doctors and administrators who spoke in medical jargon and looked at me like I was Vanessa's unfortunate accessory. But I wasn't that man anymore. I'm going to need a tuxedo, I said. Jorge grinned. Now you're thinking like a fighter. The night of the gala, I arrived fashionably late. The months of training had transformed my body completely. The tuxedo I rented fit like it was made for me, and I carried myself with a confidence that turned heads as I walked through the ballroom entrance. The venue was exactly as I remembered. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and an open bar where doctors and their spouses gathered to network and gossip. I spotted Vanessa immediately. She was holding court near the silent auction tables, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Harris stood beside her like a well-dressed accessory, nodding along as she told some story to a group of colleagues. Miranda was there too, lurking at the edge of the group with the predatory smile of someone who lived for other people's drama. She was the first to notice me, her face going pale as she whispered something urgent in Vanessa's ear. The effect was immediate and satisfying. Vanessa's laugh died mid-sentence, and Harris actually took a step backward when he saw me approaching. The group around them sensed the sudden tension and began to disperse, leaving my ex-wife and her boyfriend exposed. "Vanessa," I said, my voice carrying just far enough to be heard by the nearby tables. "You look lovely. Marriage to a successful doctor suits you." The irony wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. Several people turned to watch what was clearly going to be an uncomfortable confrontation. "David!" she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited," I said, producing the invitation from my jacket pocket. Though I have to say, the company has improved since the last time I attended one of these events. Harris stepped forward, puffing up his chest in what I assumed was meant to be an intimidating gesture. "Look, buddy, I don't know what your game is, but—" "My game?" I interrupted, letting my voice carry a bit more. "I'm not playing a game, Harris. I'm here to support the hospital where my ex-wife works. The same hospital where she met you while she was still married to me." The conversations at nearby tables had stopped completely now. This was exactly the kind of scandal that would be discussed in hospital break rooms for months. "You need to leave," Vanessa said, her professional composure starting to crack. "Security will do what exactly? Remove an invited guest who's having a polite conversation?" I smiled at the growing audience. "I'm sure that would look great in the hospital newsletter." Harris, clearly uncomfortable with being the center of attention, tried a different approach. "Listen, man, what happened between you and Vanessa is between you two. I don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" I laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Harris, if I wanted to cause trouble, do you really think I'd do it at a charity gala surrounded by witnesses?" That's when he made his mistake. Maybe it was the stress, maybe it was the alcohol, or maybe he was just tired of feeling like a coward. But Harris stepped closer and put his hand on my chest in what was clearly meant to be a threatening gesture. "I think you should leave. Now." The moment his hand touched me, I moved. Not with the clumsy desperation of the old David, but with the fluid precision Jorge had drilled into me over months of training. I stepped to the side, grabbed his wrist, and twisted just enough to send him stumbling forward. As he tried to regain his balance, I helped him along with an open-handed slap that echoed through the suddenly silent ballroom. It wasn't a punch. That would have been assault. It was barely even a slap, more like a gentle correction. But the psychological impact was devastating. Harris stumbled backward into a table, sending champagne glasses crashing to the floor, while I stood calmly adjusting my cufflinks. "Gentlemen don't put their hands on other gentlemen without permission," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I thought they taught that in medical school. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of cell phone cameras clicking. I could see at least a dozen people recording the aftermath, and I knew that within hours, video of Harris's humiliation would be circulating through every social media platform in the city. Vanessa looked mortified, Harris looked defeated, and Miranda looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. But I wasn't finished yet. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, addressing the room like I was giving a toast, "I want to thank you all for your support of Mercy General Hospital. This is a place dedicated to healing hearts and mending what's broken. Though I have to say, some hearts are harder to heal than others, especially when they've been broken by the very people who took an oath to do no harm." With that, I straightened my bow tie, nodded politely to the stunned crowd, and walked out of the ballroom with the measured pace of a man who had just accomplished exactly what he'd set out to do. By the time I got home, the video was already going viral. Someone had posted it with the caption, "Doctor gets schooled by ex-husband at hospital gala," and the comments were overwhelmingly in my favor. The narrative was shifting. I was no longer the deadbeat dad who couldn't handle his wife's success. I was the wronged husband who'd been pushed too far and finally pushed back. Jorge was waiting for me at my apartment with a bottle of whiskey and a huge grin. "I saw the video," he said, pouring 2 glasses. "Beautiful work. You didn't throw a punch, didn't raise your voice, didn't break any laws. But you made your point loud and clear." "It's just the beginning," I said, accepting the drink. "They wanted to humiliate me publicly. Now they know how it feels. But even as we celebrated, I knew this was only the first round. Vanessa and Harris would regroup, probably with Miranda's help, and they'd come back harder. The difference was, I was no longer the same man they'd dismissed and discarded. I was someone new, someone dangerous, and I was just getting started. The fallout from the gala was swift and brutal. Within 24 hours, the video had been viewed over 500,000 times across various social media platforms. The comments section had become a battlefield between people defending me as a wronged husband and others criticizing my inappropriate behavior at a charity event. But the real damage was happening behind the scenes. Mrs. Pruitt's niece Carla reported that the hospital administration was concerned about the negative publicity surrounding 2 of their doctors. Apparently, several major donors had called to express their displeasure about the unprofessional conduct they'd witnessed at the gala. Lang has been called into meetings with the chief of staff 3 times this week, Carla told her aunt, who immediately relayed the information to me. And that cardiac surgeon has been keeping a very low profile. Word is, he's considering a transfer to another hospital. This was better than I'd hoped. Harris was already looking for an exit strategy, which meant the foundation of Vanessa's new life was crumbling faster than expected. But the most unexpected development came from Olivia. She showed up at Jorge's gym on a Thursday evening, looking uncertain and younger than her 17 years. I was working the heavy bag when I noticed her standing by the entrance, clearly out of place in her designer clothes and perfect makeup. "Can we talk?" she asked when I approached her. We walked to a small diner 2 blocks away, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that could strip paint. Olivia ordered a Diet Coke and stared at it like it held the answers to life's mysteries. "I saw the video," she said finally. "Which one? You've made quite a few about me." She flinched at that, and for the first time in months, I saw genuine remorse in her eyes. "I know, I messed up. The TikTok thing got out of hand." Out of hand? I kept my voice level, but the anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. "Olivia, you turned me into a viral joke. You told the world I was a deadbeat father who abandoned his family. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" Tears started forming in her eyes, but I wasn't ready to forgive her yet. She'd participated in my destruction with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoyed causing pain. I was angry, she said. When you left that night, it felt like you were abandoning us. Mom said you didn't fight for us, that you just gave up. Your mother handed me divorce papers at her graduation ceremony, I said. She'd already moved on emotionally, probably physically. What exactly was I supposed to fight for? Olivia was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. She never told me that part. There's a lot your mother hasn't told you. Like the fact that she was seeing Harris for months before she asked for the divorce, or that she and Miranda have been planning to take me for everything I'm worth in the settlement. Miranda? Olivia looked confused. What does she have to do with anything? That was an interesting reaction. I'd assumed Olivia knew about Miranda's involvement in orchestrating the divorce proceedings, but apparently even my daughter wasn't privy to all of her mother's schemes. Your mother's best friend has been very involved in planning my downfall, I explained. She's the one who suggested the social media campaign, the one who's been feeding information to the hospital gossip network, the one who's been encouraging your mother to be as cruel as possible. Olivia's face went pale. That's not possible. Miranda's been like an aunt to me. She wouldn't what? Wouldn't manipulate people for her own entertainment? Wouldn't enjoy watching a family destroy itself? I leaned forward. Olivia, there are things about the adults in your life that you don't understand yet. She was crying openly now, mascara running down her cheeks in dark streaks. I thought I was protecting Mom. She seemed so happy with Harris, and you just disappeared. I thought you didn't care about us anymore. I cared so much that I was willing to let you both go rather than put you through a messy divorce, I said. I thought I was doing the right thing by stepping aside gracefully. But you came back, she said, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. The car thing, the gala. You came back fighting. I came back because I realized that sometimes doing the right thing just makes you an easy target, I replied. Your mother and her friends decided I was weak, irrelevant, disposable. They were wrong. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of everything that had happened settling between us like a physical presence. Finally, Olivia spoke again. What happens now? Now you have to decide which side you're on, I said, because this isn't over. Your mother and Harris and Miranda think they can destroy me and move on with their lives like nothing happened. They're about to learn that actions have consequences. Olivia wiped her eyes with a napkin and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since she was a little girl, the look she used to give me when she needed her father to fix something that seemed impossible to repair. I want to help, she said. Help with what? Whatever you're planning. I want to help you do it. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. But what I saw was genuine remorse mixed with an anger that matched my own. Olivia had been used as a weapon against me, and now she was realizing it. Are you sure? I asked. Because once you cross this line, there's no going back. Your mother will never forgive you. She's not the same person anymore, Olivia said. Ever since she became a doctor, it's like she thinks she's better than everyone else, better than you, better than me, better than anyone who doesn't have a medical degree. I'm tired of pretending that's okay. That night, I called Jorge and told him about my conversation with Olivia. He listened without interrupting, then was quiet for a long moment. Having an inside source changes everything, he said finally. But are you sure you can trust her? She's hurt you before. She's 17, and she was manipulated by adults who should have protected her, I replied. Everyone deserves a chance to make things right. And if she betrays you again? I thought about that for a moment. Then I'll deal with it. But right now, she's the key to understanding what Vanessa and Miranda are really planning. And I have a feeling there's more to this story than just a simple affair and divorce. Jorge was right to be cautious, but my instincts told me that Olivia's remorse was genuine. More importantly, she had access to information I couldn't get any other way. If I was going to bring down the people who'd tried to destroy me, I needed to understand all the players in the game. And I was beginning to suspect that Miranda's role in all of this was much bigger than anyone realized. The breakthrough came 2 weeks later, and it wasn't what any of us expected. Olivia had been slowly gathering intelligence from her position inside the enemy camp, reporting back on conversations she overheard and tensions she observed. But the real revelation came from an unlikely source, Harris himself. Olivia called me on a Saturday morning, her voice shaking with excitement and anger. "Dad, you need to meet me at the coffee shop on 5th Street. Now. I have something you need to hear." When I arrived, she was sitting in a corner booth with her laptop open, earbuds dangling around her neck. Her face was flushed with the kind of righteous indignation that only teenagers can muster. "I recorded something last night," she said without preamble. "Mom thought I was asleep, but I heard voices in the kitchen. Harris was there, and they were fighting." She handed me the earbuds, and I listened to what was clearly a heated argument between my ex-wife and her boyfriend. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but their voices were clear enough to understand. "This has gone too far, Vanessa," Harris was saying. "Your ex-husband humiliated me in front of half the medical community. People are starting to ask questions about our relationship, about the timeline of everything." "So what?" Vanessa's voice was sharp, defensive. "We're together now." "What does it matter when it started?" "It matters because Miranda told me you were planning to leave David anyway, even before we got involved. It matters because she said this was all part of some bigger plan." There was a pause, then Vanessa's voice again, quieter, but more menacing. "Miranda talks too much." "What exactly did she tell you, Vanessa? Because I'm starting to think there's a lot about this situation that you haven't shared with me." Another pause, longer this time. When Vanessa spoke again, her voice had changed completely, colder, more calculating. "Miranda has been my friend since medical school. She's the one who helped me realize that David was holding me back, that I deserved better than a life with a construction worker who would never understand my ambitions." "That's not what she told me," Harris said. "She told me that you were never really in love with David, that you married him because he was safe and stable while you figured out what you really wanted. She said the plan was always to use him to pay for medical school and then move on to someone more appropriate." The silence that followed was deafening. Even through the recording, I could feel the weight of that revelation settling over both of them. "Miranda said that?" Vanessa's voice was barely above a whisper. "She said a lot of things, Vanessa. She said you and she had talked about this for years. She said David was just a placeholder until you found someone better. She said..." "What else did she say?" Harris's voice became uncertain, like he was realizing he'd stepped into something much deeper and more dangerous than he'd expected. "She said she was in love with you. She said she'd been in love with you since medical school, and that everything she'd done, encouraging the affair, helping with the divorce, even suggesting the social media campaign through your daughter, was all to clear the path for her." The recording ended there, but I sat in stunned silence, processing what I'd just heard. Olivia was watching my face intently, waiting for my reaction. "Miranda orchestrated all of this," I said finally. "The affair, the divorce, the public humiliation campaign. She manipulated your mother into destroying our marriage so she could have her for herself." "It gets worse," Olivia said, pulling up something else on her laptop. "After Harris left, I heard Mom on the phone. She was talking to Miranda, and she was furious. She played another recording, this one shorter but even more revealing. "How could you tell him that?" Vanessa was saying. "How could you tell Harris about our conversations?" Miranda's voice came through the phone speaker, tinny but clear. "I told him the truth, Nessa. I told him that David was never really competition for your heart, because your heart was never really available. Not to him, not to Harris, not to anyone except me. Miranda, you're drunk. I'm honest. I've been in love with you for 15 years, and I've spent 15 years watching you play house with men who don't deserve you. First David, Now, Harris, when are you going to stop pretending and admit what we both know? What we both know? That you've never loved anyone the way you love me. That all of this, the marriage, the affair, the divorce, was just you trying to live up to what you thought you were supposed to want instead of accepting what you actually want. The line went quiet for a moment. Then Vanessa's voice, softer now. Miranda, I know you feel it too, Nessa. I've seen the way you look at me when you think no one's watching. I've felt the way you touch my hand when you're talking. I've been waiting for you to be ready, and I thought maybe now. The recording ended abruptly, leaving both Olivia and me staring at the laptop screen in shock. So Miranda's in love with Mom, Olivia said, and she destroyed our family to get her. It's more than that, I said, my mind racing through the implications. Miranda didn't just destroy our family, she manipulated your mother into destroying it herself. She made Vanessa think the affair and the divorce were her own ideas, when really, she was just following a script Miranda had written. The scope of the manipulation was breathtaking. Miranda had played everyone, me, Vanessa, Harris, even Olivia, like pieces on a chessboard, moving us around to serve her own agenda. She'd turned my daughter against me, encouraged my wife to be as cruel as possible, and orchestrated a public humiliation campaign designed to ensure I could never interfere with her plans. But there was one thing Miranda hadn't counted on: the possibility that her carefully constructed house of cards might collapse, and that when it did, all her victims might end up on the same side. What do we do now? Olivia asked. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw not the spoiled teenager who'd made TikTok videos mocking me, but a young woman who'd been manipulated and used by adults she trusted. She deserved better than to be a pawn in someone else's game. Now we give them exactly what they deserve, I said. All of them. Even Mom? I considered that question carefully. Vanessa had made choices, cruel, selfish choices that had caused real harm. But she'd also been manipulated by someone she considered her best friend, someone who'd been playing a long game that spanned decades. Your mother made her own choices, I said finally, but she made them based on lies and manipulation. She deserves to know the truth about what Miranda did to all of us. Olivia nodded, then surprised me by reaching across the table and taking my hand. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. For the videos, for the things I said, for not seeing what was really happening. You were 17 and surrounded by adults who were lying to you, I said. The important thing is that you see it now. So what's the plan? I smiled, and for the first time in months it wasn't a cold or calculating expression. It was the smile of a father who'd just gotten his daughter back, and a man who was about to settle some very old scores. We're going to give them a show they'll never forget. The plan required perfect timing and careful orchestration. I spent 2 weeks preparing, with Jorge helping me work out the logistics and Olivia providing intelligence from inside the enemy camp. The goal wasn't just revenge, it was revelation. Everyone needed to understand exactly what had been done to them and who was really responsible. The opportunity came in the form of another hospital event, a dedication ceremony for the new cardiac wing that Harris had helped design. It was being held in the hospital's main auditorium, with local media coverage and speeches from the hospital board. More importantly, it was an event where Vanessa, Harris, and Miranda would all be present, along with most of the hospital staff who'd been gossiping about our family drama for months. Olivia's job was to ensure that certain key pieces of evidence would be available when I needed them. She'd been recording conversations for weeks now, building a comprehensive archive of Miranda's manipulation and her mother's complicity. More importantly, she'd discovered that Miranda had been keeping her own records, emails, text messages, even a journal where she documented her 15-year campaign to win Vanessa's love. She's incredibly organized, Olivia reported during one of our planning sessions. She has everything saved on her laptop, like she's proud of what she's done. There are emails going back years, where she's giving Mom advice about how to handle you. how to make you feel small and irrelevant. Can you access the laptop? I asked. I already have. She uses the same password for everything, and she's always leaving it open when she comes over to the house. Olivia's smile was sharp with satisfaction. I've copied everything to a flash drive. The night of the dedication ceremony, I arrived early and positioned myself in the back of the auditorium. Jorge was there too, along with several of his gym regulars, men and women who understood loyalty and weren't afraid of a fight if things got physical. Mrs. Pruitt had also come, bringing her niece Carla and several other hospital employees who'd grown tired of Miranda's gossip and manipulation over the years. The ceremony began with the usual speeches and presentations. Harris gave a talk about the new cardiac wing, looking uncomfortable under the bright stage lights. Vanessa was sitting in the front row with the other department heads, wearing a navy blue dress that made her look professional and untouchable. Miranda sat beside her, playing the role of supportive best friend to perfection. When the formal presentations ended, there was a brief reception in the auditorium lobby. This was my moment. I approached the small stage where a microphone had been left active for the evening's speakers. The crowd was milling around, making small talk and sampling the hospital cafeteria's attempt at fancy hors d'oeuvres. Most people didn't notice me until I tapped the microphone and the feedback echoed through the room. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's sound system. "I'd like to say a few words about dedication." The reaction was immediate and electric. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, heads turned, and I could see Vanessa's face go pale as she realized what was happening. Harris looked like he wanted to disappear, and Miranda was already moving toward the exit. "My name is David Chen," I continued, "and I'm here tonight because I have something to say about the dedication it takes to destroy a family." Security was already moving toward the stage, but Jorge and his people were moving too, positioning themselves to buy me the time I needed. 3 months ago, I was married to Dr. Vanessa Lang, I said, gesturing toward my ex-wife. We'd been together for 15 years, and I'd spent most of that time supporting her dream of becoming a doctor. I worked double shifts, lived on ramen noodles, and sacrificed my own ambitions so she could achieve hers. The crowd was completely silent now, transfixed by the unfolding drama. The night she graduated from medical school, she handed me divorce papers. She said she'd outgrown our marriage, outgrown me. I signed those papers without a fight because I loved her enough to let her go. I could see Olivia near the front of the crowd, her phone recording everything. Several other people were doing the same. This would be online within minutes. But what I didn't know, I continued, was that the divorce wasn't really her idea. It was the culmination of a 15-year campaign of manipulation orchestrated by someone she trusted completely. Now I had everyone's attention, including Miranda's. She'd stopped trying to leave and was staring at me with undisguised hatred. "Miranda Walsh," I said, looking directly at her, "has been in love with my ex-wife since medical school. She spent 15 years slowly poisoning our marriage, encouraging every doubt, amplifying every conflict, and finally orchestrating an affair that would give Vanessa the excuse she needed to leave." The crowd was buzzing now, people looking back and forth between Miranda and Vanessa like they were watching a tennis match. Miranda convinced my daughter to create social media content mocking me as a deadbeat father. She fed gossip to the hospital staff about my supposed failures as a husband. She even encouraged my ex-wife to be as cruel as possible during the divorce proceedings, all to ensure that I would be too broken and humiliated to interfere with her plans. Vanessa was on her feet now, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "David, stop this. You're making a fool of yourself." "Am I?" I reached into my jacket and pulled out a flash drive. Because I have 15 years of emails, text messages, and recorded conversations that tell a very different story. I nodded to Olivia, who moved to a laptop that had been set up for the evening's presentations. Within seconds, Miranda's own words were echoing through the auditorium's sound system, her voice explaining to Vanessa how to make me feel small and irrelevant, her detailed plans for breaking up our marriage, her confessions of love and obsession. The effect was devastating. Vanessa turned to stare at Miranda with a look of betrayal and horror that was visible even from the back of the auditorium. Harris was backing away from both women like they were contaminated. The hospital staff was buzzing with excitement. This was gossip gold that would fuel break room conversations for years. But I wasn't finished yet. The real tragedy, I said, my voice cutting through the noise, isn't that Miranda manipulated all of us. It's that she convinced my ex-wife to destroy her own family for something that was never real. I looked directly at Vanessa, and for a moment, it was like we were the only two people in the room. Harris doesn't love you, Vanessa. He's already looking for a way out, and after tonight, he'll have the excuse he needs. Miranda doesn't love you either. She loves the idea of you, the fantasy she's been building for 15 years. She doesn't love the real woman who's capable of cruelty and manipulation when it serves her purposes. Vanessa's composure finally cracked completely. Tears were streaming down her face, and she looked lost and small in a way I hadn't seen since she was a struggling medical student. The saddest part, I continued, is that we could have had a real conversation about our marriage. We could have worked through our problems like adults, maybe even found a way to grow together instead of apart. But Miranda made sure that never happened because an amicable divorce wouldn't have served her agenda. Security had finally reached the stage, but I held up my hands to show I wasn't resisting. "I'm done," I said into the microphone. "I've said what I came to say." As they escorted me from the auditorium, I could hear the chaos erupting behind me. Vanessa was screaming at Miranda. Harris was trying to distance himself from both women, and the crowd was buzzing with excitement over the best hospital drama anyone had seen in years. But the moment that mattered most came as I was being led through the lobby. Olivia broke free from the crowd and ran to me, throwing her arms around my neck in a fierce hug. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she whispered in my ear. "I'm proud of us." Jorge appeared beside us, grinning like a proud trainer whose fighter had just won the championship. "Beautiful work," he said. "You didn't throw a punch, didn't break any laws, didn't even raise your voice. But you knocked them all out with nothing but the truth." As we walked out of the hospital together, me, my daughter, and the man who'd taught me how to fight back, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not the peace of victory, but the peace of completion. I'd done what I set out to do, and I'd done it without compromising my principles or becoming the kind of man I couldn't live with. Behind us, the people who'd tried to destroy me were dealing with the consequences of their choices. Miranda's career at the hospital was finished. No one would ever trust her again. Harris would transfer to another hospital within a month, eager to escape the scandal. And Vanessa would have to rebuild her life from scratch, finally understanding the true cost of the choices she'd made. But that was their problem now. I had my daughter back, I had my self-respect back, and I had a future that belonged entirely to me. The war was over, and for the first time in 15 years, I'd won something that actually mattered. The gym was packed on a Saturday morning, filled with the sounds of gloves hitting heavy bags and the rhythmic skip of jump ropes on concrete floors. I was working with a new student, a recently divorced accountant who'd found his way to Jorge's place after his own family fell apart. He reminded me of myself 6 months ago, angry, hurt, and looking for a way to channel his pain into something constructive. "Keep your guard up," I told him as he worked the speed bag. "And remember, it's not about hitting harder, it's about hitting smarter." Jorge appeared beside me, wiping sweat from his forehead with a towel. At 52, he could still go 3 rounds with men half his age, but he was starting to let guys like me handle more of the training responsibilities. "Your daughter's here," he said, nodding toward the entrance. Olivia was standing by the door, looking more comfortable in the gym than she had 6 months ago. She'd been coming around regularly, sometimes to work out, sometimes just to talk. The relationship we'd rebuilt was stronger than what we'd had before. It was based on honesty now, on mutual respect, rather than obligation. "How'd the college interview go?" I asked as she approached. "Good, I think." They seemed impressed by my essay about social media responsibility and the dangers of online bullying. She smiled wryly. Apparently, having personal experience with the subject matter was compelling. Olivia had deleted all her TikTok accounts and started speaking at high schools about the real-world consequences of cyberbullying. It was her way of making amends, and colleges were taking notice. She'd already been accepted to 3 schools, all offering partial scholarships. "Any word from your mother?" I asked. Olivia's expression grew more serious. "She's doing better. The therapy is helping, and she's starting to understand how much Miranda manipulated her. She asked me to tell you she's sorry." I nodded. Vanessa and I had spoken twice since the hospital confrontation, both conversations brief and awkward but civil. She was seeing a therapist, trying to understand how she'd allowed herself to be manipulated for so many years. Harris had indeed transferred to a hospital in another state, and Miranda had been quietly let go from her position in hospital administration. "She also wanted me to ask if you'd be willing to meet with her sometime," Olivia continued. "Not to get back together or anything like that, just to, I don't know, talk about everything that happened." I considered this. The anger that had driven me for months was mostly gone now, replaced by something that might eventually become forgiveness. Not forgiveness for the pain she'd caused, but forgiveness for the weakness that had made her susceptible to manipulation. "Maybe," I said, "when I'm ready." Jorge clapped me on the shoulder. "You've got a class to teach in 10 minutes, he reminded me. "The Saturday morning group is getting restless." I looked across the gym at the collection of men and women who'd found their way here for various reasons: divorce, job loss, family problems, or just the need to feel strong again. They were my people now, the community I'd built after losing the one I'd thought was permanent. "You want to stick around and watch?" I asked Olivia. "Actually, I was hoping you might want to grab lunch after. There's something I want to talk to you about." "Good something or bad something?" She grinned, and for a moment she looked like the little girl who used to wait for me to come home from work so she could show me her latest art project. Good something. Definitely good something. An hour later, we were sitting in the same diner where we'd had our reconciliation conversation months earlier. Olivia had ordered a burger and fries, a far cry from the diet obsession that had characterized her teenage years. "So what's this good something?" I asked. She pulled out her phone and showed me a video that had been posted to YouTube. It was professionally shot and edited, featuring Olivia speaking to a group of high school students about her experience with cyberbullying and social media manipulation. "It's got over 2 million views," she said proudly. "And I've been getting messages from teenagers all over the country who want to share their own stories." The video was powerful. Olivia spoke honestly about how she'd been manipulated into hurting me, about the real-world consequences of online cruelty, and about the importance of thinking critically about the information we consume and share. "I want to do more of this," she said. "Maybe study communications or psychology in college, focus on digital media literacy and online safety. I want to help other kids avoid the mistakes I made." I felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with revenge or vindication. This was my daughter, using her experience to help others, turning her mistakes into wisdom that could benefit people she'd never meet. "I think that's a great idea," I said. "You've got a gift for reaching people, and you understand the subject better than most adults." We finished lunch and walked back toward the gym, passing through the neighborhood that had become my home. The streets were still cracked, the buildings still showed their age, but there was life here. Real, honest life lived by people who understood that strength comes from getting back up after you've been knocked down. "Dad?" Olivia said as we reached my truck. "Yeah? I'm proud of how you handled everything. You could have gotten really ugly with Mom and Miranda and Harris, but you didn't. You told the truth and let them deal with the consequences." "Sometimes the truth is the most powerful weapon you have," I said. And sometimes the best revenge is just living well and being the kind of person you can respect in the mirror. She hugged me goodbye, and I watched her drive away in the car I'd bought her for her 18th birthday. Nothing fancy, but reliable and safe. As she disappeared around the corner, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: contentment. The old David would have been planning his next move, worrying about what people thought of him, trying to anticipate and control every variable in his life. The new David understood that some things were beyond his control, and that was okay. I had my daughter back. I had work that mattered to me. I had a community of people who respected me for who I was, not what I could provide for them. And I had the knowledge that when life had tried to break me, I'd found a way to break back, not with cruelty or violence, but with truth and persistence, and the kind of strength that can only be forged in the fire of real adversity. Jorge was waiting for me when I got back to the gym, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the expression of a man who had something important to say. "I've been thinking," he said, handing me one of the cups. "This place is getting too big for one old boxer to handle. I could use a partner, someone who understands what we're really doing here." I looked around the gym, at the fighters training for upcoming matches, at the divorced dads working through their anger on heavy bags, at the young women learning to defend themselves, at the community of people who'd found strength in this place. "Are you offering me a job?" I asked. "I'm offering you a future," Jorge replied, "if you want it." I thought about the construction business I'd been slowly rebuilding, about the safe and predictable life I could have if I wanted it. Then I thought about the satisfaction I felt when I helped someone discover their own strength, when I watched them transform from victim to survivor to victor. "I want it," I said. Jorge smiled and raised his coffee cup. "To new partnerships." "To new partnerships," I agreed. As we shook hands, I realized that this was what victory actually looked like. Not the destruction of your enemies, but the construction of something better from the wreckage they'd left behind. Vanessa and Harris and Miranda had tried to write me out of the story of my own life, but instead, they'd given me the motivation to write a better story entirely. The gym was filling up with the afternoon crowd, and I had work to do. Real work, meaningful work, the kind of work that built people up instead of tearing them down. I finished my coffee, laced up my training gloves, and got back to the business of living well. The end. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching,